President Trump still accuses the Biden administration of having weaponized the Justice Department against him. But now he's the one calling on DOJ to go after his opponents. In a highly political and vitriolic address at the Justice Department's Great Hall, the president called out his critics by name, accused them of breaking the law, and vowed to exact revenge.
These are people that are bad people, really bad people. They tried to turn America into a corrupt, communist, and third world country. As the chief law enforcement officer in our country, I will insist upon and demand full and complete accountability for the wrongs and abuses that have occurred. What a difference a rigged and crooked election had on our country when you think about it, and the people who did this to us should go to jail. They should go to jail.
Joining me now, Congressman Jamie Raskin of Maryland. He's the ranking Democrat on the House Judiciary Committee and held a press conference yesterday to counter some of the president's claims. Congressman Raskin, thank you very much for coming to the Saturday show. First and foremost, let me get your reaction to the president's speech, but also the clip we played there where he said these people should go to jail. They should go to jail.
Yeah. Well, first of all, there's never been anything like this in American history where the President of the United States goes to the Department of Justice and then sets forth an agenda of prosecution against his political enemies. We've never seen anything like that before. All of it was based on the big lie, which he went back to in that clip that you saw. He lost that election by more than 7 million votes. So he considers what he did in 2024 a landslide with 2.1 million votes. This was more than 7 million votes that Joe Biden beat him by, 306 to 232 in the Electoral College. That was an absolute landslide. And yet he goes back and asserts the big lie, which even his own attorney general told him was BS, a word that Donald Trump used yesterday to describe the claims against him. And I said, the last time I heard that word was out of the mouth of his own attorney general, William Barr, who told him that all of his fraudulent claims of electoral corruption were just that. And yet there's just this trail of bile and viciousness that we saw yesterday at the Department of Justice, and it obviously disgraced a department that was once hallowed and revered.
I was just about to ask you about that. Talk about why. I mean, he was the first sitting president to go to the Department of Justice since President Obama. Why was it such a disgrace, or I think you called it a desecration of the values of the department? Explain to viewers why that is.
Well, we've had a tradition that there's independent criminal law enforcement, and the prosecutors operate based on the facts of reported federal crimes and what the law is. And then they proceed in their grand jury indictments and so on. Donald Trump went over and said, here's my enemies list, prosecute these people. That's what we're going to do. That is an absolute desecration of the meaning of the rule of law. I mean, there was law under King George and under the monarchs, but it was all law against the people by the king. And he wants to go back to that. The whole idea of the rule of law is that it's got to apply against everybody, including the people who hold public office. Our framers thought that those of us who aspire and attain a public office are nothing but the servants of the people, and he's acting like an emperor, like a king. It was absolutely profane what happened yesterday at the Department of Justice.
I mean, the Department of Justice is supposed to be, justice is supposed to be blind. It's supposed to be impartial. And DOJ, the way we've been talking about, the way the president talks about it, DOJ, he views it as his own personal law firm.
They sacked dozens of prosecutors simply because they had prosecuted January 6th insurrectionists. And Donald Trump now disapproves of it. Of course, the day after January 6th, on January 7th, when he was scrambling to keep his whole political career alive, he said these people had nothing to do with him. They should be prosecuted to the full extent of the law and so on. Well, now it serves his purpose to deny all of that. And he called them yesterday political prisoners like Alexei Navalny or Alexander Solzhenitsyn or Nelson Mandela. It was absolutely obscene. But he started off the speech by proclaiming his fidelity to free expression and the First Amendment. But of course, by the end of it, you couldn't help noticing that he wanted to go after all of his political enemies. And in fact, his entire administration has been geared at suppressing the freedom of speech of his enemies or people who just cross him in some ways. He sued CBS I think it was, for $200 billion because he didn't like the way that his opponent Kamala Harris was portrayed. He thought it was too positive. He shook down ABC for $15 million for equally specious and flimsy charges. He is using the power of the state to shake down media institutions in America, to terrify and intimidate people. That's authoritarianism. He's going down the road of Putin in Russia and Orban in Hungary, which is why we've got to stay united and focused on defending constitutional democracy against this authoritarian attack.
I'm glad you say we have to stay united and focused to push back on this, and yet just the first two blocks of the show, we were talking about an instance where the opposition, Democrats in the House, didn't vote for the CR, but Democrats in the Senate, they voted for it, and now it has passed. Are Democrats or the opposition, do they have the wherewithal
Yes.
to push back and hold him accountable, to fight in the way that Americans would like them to fight, and certainly the base of the party would like them to fight?
Well, I strongly opposed that dismal continuing resolution, which added billions of dollars and more cuts to Medicaid and health care and the things that we need. It also retroactively, I think, vindicated all of their fraudulent claims that they're using to tear down the government. We don't want to give them any more license. But the real critique, so obviously we disagreed with our friends in the Senate strongly about that way that it played out. But the real critique, I think, belongs to all of us. The House and Senate Democrats should not act as if we occupy different galaxies. We should be working together and working before these things come up to develop an organized, coherent, democratic response. So it's not like we're on separate teams. So I think there's a bit of fault everywhere. But in any event, none of it compares to the authoritarian attack on our institutions. And either way we went on that, it was going to be struggling to defend ourselves against a party that wants to shut down American democracy and replace it with techno-state dictatorship. And Elon Musk is very explicit about that. I mean, he and his Silicon Valley fascist juvenile night crew really believe that democracy is defunct. They believe we are in a post-constitutional America, and they want to replace it with dictatorship. If you look at this interview that Curtis Yarvin, their guru, did a month ago, New York Times, he said Americans have got to get over their fear of dictatorship and the word dictatorship, because that's just what CEOs do in corporations, and we need the same thing for the U.S. government, which they believe reports just to the CEOs.